Backed by popular demand, everybody and anybody has been asking me about redoing the video based on setting up a parameter vise so that we can control things like parallel and stock. And in this video, you're going to learn how to do that as well as front loading your setup to make doing your machining faster, easier, and simpler for maybe guys that aren't very experienced, or if you're just like me, super lazy and looking for the easiest way to accomplish the task. That said, guys, let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so once you get your Vise imported and set inside of Fusion 360, there's a couple of steps that we're going to take to prep this model so that we can turn it into our actual fixture with our parameters. So the very first thing I'm going to do is one, evaluate whether or not my timeline is on. I am legendary for forgetting about this, guys. If you do it, don't worry, happens to the best of us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and right click at the top, assembly, and I'm going to capture design history. As you can see now, I have that history bar at the bottom of my screen. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to evaluate, am I working with components or if I'm working with bodies? In this case, I'm actually working with bodies, which I am going to convert over into components. So again, all I did was I held shift, picked the first and the last, right click, converted those all to components. So now what I like to do is I like to basically organize a little bit here. So what I'm going to create is I'm going to create a brand new component, and this is going to be my stock. Actually, that's not going to be my stock. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is going to be the vise itself. And then from that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate that. We're going to then add another component inside of that. I like to make one the fixed jaw. And then we're going to make another one, again, keeping sure that that is active at the vise level. This is going to be my moving jaw. So we're going to have a vise, and then we're also going to make another component under the top level, and this is going to be our stock. Again, we want our stock to basically control everything and anything when we get to using this actual vise. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create one more level, and this is, again, going to be filed under that very top area. If for some reason you guys are having problems where it's automatically activating, keep in mind you can click this activation here, but we're going to go ahead and name this part. And this is where a little later on you're going to see is I can place my part right inside of here and possibly prep my setup utilizing the cam workspace. So let's go back now. Let's do a little organizing and a little house cleaning, right? So personally, this is how I approach this, is I like to drag and move things out of the way. Now, if you can't drag and move different components on your actual assembly, the problem you have is because you never actually converted your bodies to components. So you're going to want to go ahead and jump back a little bit and rewatch that area. But now that I've grabbed all of the pieces in this example that I want to place nicely in my moving jaw area, I'm actually just going to hold control and I'm going to double left click each one of these, as I'm going to call them bodies here, but you're going to see I'm highlighting my components on the left. And then I'm going to drag those components down into the moving jaw component folder. This is asking me whether or not we want to capture, position, or revert. It's okay to revert this. And you're going to notice everything snaps back super quick and easy. Now, I like this because if I go back now over on the left and I click the eyeball for moving jaw, you're going to notice my moving jaw has completely disappeared now. So I can use that to my advantage. I'm going to go over here to the left. I'm going to grab the rest of my components. And we're going to move all of those components down into the fixed jaw area. And to understand that we did that correctly, if I toggle off fixed jaw and toggle on moving, we should now have those two separated out. If I'm to expand these out, we're going to see all of these components residing in each one of these. So let's go ahead and minimize those back up, because at this time we can leave everything on, or you could turn it off at the top level of Vise, because we're now going to make our stock box. So now I'm going to activate the stock component. Again, there's nothing in this component currently, just the origin. And what I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a box. And it doesn't really matter what plane I sketch this on, because we are going to control this with parameters later. But I do recommend that you punch in some generic dimensions so you know what you're changing later. As you can see, I have 1, 2, and 3 set. This is a new body, and that new body has populated under stock. So let's start to, actually, we're going to pause there for a moment because we still need to create some parallels. So again, I'm going to turn off stock. In this case, I need a parallel for the fixed jaw as well as the moving jaw. So it's up to you how you guys go about this, but a quick tip here is I'm going to go back to the top level and I'm going to activate that, and I'm going to create one more component, and this is going to be my parallels. And what you're going to see me do here is with the parallels activated, we're going to create another box. And what this box is going to allow us to do is to create the shape of the parallel that we want. So again, very generically, we're just going to go ahead and create the physical side of this and then go in and say 1 inch tall. Maybe this is an 1/8 inch wide parallel. And lastly, I do want this 6 inches long because it is going to go on a 6-inch vise. So this is where the cool kind of side of Fusion comes in. So if we go back to our top level, I'm going to go down and click the parallel, and I'm going to right click copy, and then I'm going to go to the top level and I'm going to say paste. And this is where you all are going to make a decision. Usually I put parallels in my machine. They're a matched set. Some of you may want 2 different size parallels, but for this instance, I'm going to paste, not paste new. If you want to be able to control each parallel separate, you would do a paste new. However, again, I want just 2 identical parallels. And if you haven't guessed it yet, we're going to actually take those parallels and we're going to drag one into the fixed jaw. We're going to drag the other one up into the moving jaw. So if we go ahead and get everything turned back on, you're going to notice that it's probably looking a little messy here because we haven't actually built our assembly yet. And that's what we're going to do now. So the easiest way to build out the assemblies inside of Fusion is using the design tree over here to my advantage. So let's get my part and my stock out of the way. And now what I like to do is I can either turn off things with the eyeball or I can right click and isolate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate strictly just the fixed jaw. And as you notice here is I actually have this little parallel still floating down there. It's more than okay, guys. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to highlight everything with a window except that parallel. And what I'm going to do with that is I am going to create a rigid group. And now what a rigid group is going to do is we're going to go ahead and revert the position. Is it's going to take everything, and again, we didn't select that parallel, it's just hanging out there. And it's going to create that all down into one solid piece. So as you can see, there is nuts and bolts on this assembly, but there is nothing really holding this thing together other than that rigid actual joint. So not rigid joint, I apologize, guys. It's a rough one. It's Friday for me too. So that is actually a rigid group, not a rigid joint. So now we're going to go ahead and revert that back. Again, I just used my buttons on my timeline, and I'm going to do a joint between my parallel, and I'm going to use the bottom center of the side of my parallel, and I'm going to take that up top here, and I'm going to, again, go onto that face holding control and left click. And as you're going to see, that parallel comes up and snaps into place perfectly. Awesome. It works exactly like I wanted it to do. So now we can, again, we can right click, and in this case, I'm going to unisolate what we've done. And you're going to notice everything snaps back. I'm going to go to my moving jaw. I'm going to right click and isolate. And we're going to basically rinse and repeat. So let's go ahead. And in this case, I'm going to do a rigid group. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight. In this case, I can't highlight, as you're seeing, because I can't drop that window because it's asking me to pick things. So let's go ahead and cancel that. And let's go in and drop our window. And again, I'm avoiding that parallel temporarily. We're going to go back to rigid group. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. And again, to verify that that's all stuck together, I'm going to click and drag that around, and then we're going to revert it back. Again, we're just going to do a standard joint. I'm going to use bottom edge of my parallel, bottom edge of my vise jaw, and now I can go ahead and hit OK. Moving back over, we're going to go ahead and unisolate everything, getting our jaws all back and set in place. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my stock back on because it's now time to put my stock in place. So let's go ahead and do another joint. So to make life easy on myself, I'm going to go ahead and use the big side on the bottom. And again, I'm using that method of putting my mouse on the face I want, holding control, and then going to the node. And as you can see, that's snapped up now into place. We're going to go ahead and do a 90-degree rotation and hit OK. And then again, I'm going to right click and we're going to repeat this joint one more time, going to the bottom side again, holding control, getting that node on the one side. And then I'm going to move over here to the other side, holding control. As you're going to see, those two are going to snap together. We're going to hit OK. And now just like that, my jaw has slid in perfectly onto my stock. And now my stock is sitting inside my vise on my parallels. We even have our lovely little chip protector slid all the way through our vise, letting us know that we're in a good spot. So the last thing I'm going to do here, and this is a personal preference thing for all of you, is I'm actually going to add a joint origin, and I'm going to move my vise down to the origin of the assembly. So if I turn on my origin here, this is where I'm going to position it like it's in my machine. So we're going to go ahead and say a joint from the top dead center of my stock. And if I go down to my origin here, you're going to notice this thing's going to snap down. To start with, it is facing the wrong way. So let's go ahead and hit flip. I also know that the long side is my y-axis. Actually, it's not my y-axis. I apologize. I want the short side as the y-axis. So I'm going to rotate 90 degrees. Again, this looks very confusing, and I understand that, guys, because you do have that inactive view of the vise, and nothing is moving except the stock. But as soon as we hit OK, you're going to notice everything just snapped down. Now, in my case, I lucked out, and my X positive is the right direction. However, if yours didn't, we could actually go back down on our timeline where that rigid joint we just created was. And instead of going positive 90, you could actually rotate, 270, or you could go negative 90 to reverse what you have going on. In my case, we did luck out. Usually this doesn't happen. I don't know how I got lucky today. Somebody up there in the machinist world is looking out for me. But let's go ahead and get our joints turned off. So we're going to go ahead and turn those joints on over here on the left, and you could toggle those on and off as you need. You could also, one neat thing here is we can go over here onto our drawing and pick the actual joint and hit V on our keyboard, and it's going to disappear the moment you click away. I'm also going to turn off my origin. And like I told you guys, we're going to go ahead and place a joint origin right here at the top center of our part. Again, we want to rotate this. As you can see, it does give us that green and red and blue line signifying X, Y, and Z. But I want to get that all in position so that in the event that I need that joint origin, it's a very easy reference point to grab later on. We don't need to leave the joint origin on, however. So again, I'm going to go ahead and click that, and I'm going to hit V, turning it off. Oop. We got a little further ahead of ourselves. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Z. Again, I'm going to pick that and hit V, turning it off once I click away. So let's go ahead and start setting up our parameters to control this now. In my opinion, it's much easier to build out what we want and then add the parameters second, making our lives much easier. So if we go into our parameters, you're going to notice that this is going to kind of line up with our tree over on the left. And what that is going to allow us to do, maybe I should expand that out just a little bit more. And let's get these categories. So we do have our fixed jaw. We have our parallel. We have our moving jaw. We also have our stock. So let's start with stock. So in the case of my model, let's see if I can position this the best way possible so we can see this in real time. I want to be able to control my stock size, right? So I do have this stock perimeter, and we have the 2, 1, and 3. Noticing these are out of position. So I'm going to create user parameters here. So we're going to go ahead and hit the plus sign. And this is going to be my stock height. And again, you can't do this all as one. It's got to be one word, so you can't use spaces. And now I'm going to set my stock height now to 2 inches. And now you're going to notice that user parameter has populated up here at the top. So if I look down below, this dimension 2 is set to 1 inch. Now, if I start to type stock, you're going to see stock height come through. I'm going to hit enter. And just like that, the height of my stock has changed. So let's go ahead and do this a few more times. We're going to add another parameter. This is going to be stock underscore width. And then let's go ahead and bump that up to now 3 inches. Again, if we go down below and I type in stock and add width, push enter, nothing has changed because that dimension was correct from the get-go. Now, if I change it up here at the top, this is the cool thing. So if I now say 4 inches, notice how that actually expands out. You guys don't have to use my terminology by any means here. You guys can come up with your own terminology. For the last one, we're going to just say stock underscore depth. And this is going to now be, let's go for, I like 5 inches. Not the best way to hold this part, but I think you guys are starting to get the point. So again, we're going to go ahead and start to populate stock depth. I hit enter, and just like that, my vise has opened up to accommodate that stock. So if we go through here and we change this to whatever we want, you're going to see in real time that this updates that actual physical body that is our stock. And how that works is based on those parameters. So now a few other things I may want to update is I may actually want the ability to update the parallels. So again, this is your personal opinion on this. I'm going to go ahead and create a parameter for my parallel height. Given my parallels are all the same exact kind of thickness of an 1/8 inch. Maybe sometimes you use some much smaller ones based on what you're machining. We're going to keep it very basic. So we're actually going to go to a 125 parallel. And again, I'm going to go down to where that 1 inch height is. And we're going to go type in para H in my case. And as soon as I click out of there or hit enter, you're going to notice my parallel height changes. And to see that a little closer, let's go to a 0.5 parallel, or let's take this all the way up to a 1.5 parallel. And just like that, we're now up in the ante and now able to control everything. The nice thing is if we look at that origin up at the top, no matter what I kind of type in here, it doesn't actually affect what we have going on when it comes to that origin location. Again, this is going to be very valuable if you're going to trigger this to use for your setup in your actual cam workspace. So let's go ahead and hit OK. So give this a moment to think. We're going to go ahead and get squared back up to everything going on. I'm actually going to turn that origin off. And now I like to do a couple of simple things just to make this a little bit easier on the next person using it. And some of those is one, I'm going to go ahead and change the appearance of my stock. I'm going to go down to paint. I prefer a nice glossy color like red, and we're going to download that. And with that being said, we're going to apply red to that body. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to right click that stock again. And we're going to go down to opacity. And I like to bring it down to about 40 or 30%, depending on what color I chose. I might take that down just a little bit further to maybe 20. The idea is I want to be able to see my part through the stock here, making my life much easier when it comes time to do my setups. So now let's go ahead and jump over to the manufacturer workspace and prep our setup. So how I'm going to do that is first I'm going to save. Always want to save your file so that you don't have any issues with it. I'm going to go from design over to manufacturer, and now I'm going to create my setup. So let's walk through this setup. So first and foremost, my model orientation, and this is why it was so important to put that joint at the top in the middle of our stock, is perfect. So according to the world and according to what we have here, we are orientated correctly. Well, now what I need to do is I need to define a few things here. So one, it's asking for a stock box point, but as you can see, the stock box is crazy. So let's go ahead and go to the stock side. I'm going to say from solid, and I'm now going to pick that red box that we've created. And you're going to notice how my XYZ coordinates has snapped to dead center on what I'm doing here. One other thing you can do is if you guys needed to, you could always expand out your design tree, which as you're going to notice here, this is why we made stock its kind of own component so that we can simply get to it as easy and fast as possible. Again, I could go to stock over here on the left and pick that. Now, my model that we're going to work on, this is always fun. And before I jump to that model real quick, I just want to let you guys know, you can move this stock point to wherever you want based on what you're going to use for your work offset. I'm going to leave mine top center because I'm also going to front load my probing cycles here. But moving over to the model side of things is I'm going to go ahead and select now the part component. So we're going to go ahead and turn that on to, although it's an empty component, once we get to the point of using this and dragging and dropping our part in, you're going to see how valuable this is. So from here, we could also add fixture if you guys wanted. And as you can see, very easy to grab my entire vise. If I wanted a fixture attachment point, we could go ahead and add that in. We didn't add one on this like we did in the 5-axis world. Not a big deal, guys. The great thing is if you use a machine, you could use a selected point. But this is about all we have to do for prepping this for whatever we plan to do. So in the future, when we come in, we select our machine, we run through, we modify our program for whatever we want, and then we could even add in our different work offsets. So we can go ahead and hit OK. And now let's give this a couple of tool paths. So like I said, is we're going to go in and we're going to add our probe WCS. I'm going to select my probe. So luckily enough, I have this nice 6mm probe in my library. And my geometry is going to be based off my stock. And as you're going to notice, my stock isn't currently here. Well, we can turn it on over here on the left. And then we can go in and we can select that actual stock. But because we're using a solid body, it doesn't think it's actually stock as we defined it. So this is where we go back to the model side of things and we pick that top face. Again, because this is a modeled stock, it's not a created in the background of Fusion stock. Now we're going to do our XY rectangle, or as I like to do my Z face first. And then we're going to go ahead and pro tip here, you can go ahead and duplicate that. Double click on it to get back into it. And now let's go ahead and go for our XY. Again, aligning us on center. And before I actually finish this up, You guys might add in all kinds of crazy roughing cycles. For me, 99% of the time, we're always going to face off the top of that part. So I'm going to go ahead and go out and grab my lovely 2-inch face mill and add that in there. So as you can see, we're now facing off the top of that stock and everything based on our part file. And we've already prepped everything for our machining from there. So let's go ahead now and take a look at how we can use this. So again, we're going to save this and we're going to jump back over into our design table. And as you're going to see, this file is actually being saved. One thing I'm going to do is I am going to rename this file. And this is going to be my Kurt DX6 template. As you can see, I can't type, proves out how much of a machinist I am. And now let's go grab a part that we can use. So we're going to go back to our other file formats here. As you guys see, I have a lot of different video content that I'm going to use. And just like that, I now have my vise. I now have the part that I plan to work on. So let's get that opened up. And again, we're going to go ahead and clear out this file because I failed to before this demonstration and go back to the design side of things. So it's really up to you which way you all plan to use this. What I personally would do is I would actually have my template file, pop it open real quick, do a file save as, and then this is where I would just label this, in this case, this is my throttle body. And this is going to be my CNC file. And as you can see, we've now saved that. It's populated here. And I'm going to take my throttle body spacer and I'm going to bring it into this file. However, as you can see right here is if we hit active on the part first, this will help you guys a ton. We want to make sure it's visible. I'm going to just drag and drop that in. And what you're going to notice is it's going to jump directly inside of Fusion and it's automatically going to place it under part, all while keeping everything linked. Now, again, just makes my life easier to set this a little higher and out of the way. But let's go through now and actually get this moved into position. So again, activating the top level just makes this a little bit more visual. We're going to go ahead and do a joint. I'm going to put my mouse on that top face, grabbing the top center of that body, place that top center on my stock. Oh no, we're upside down, not a big deal. Go ahead and hit that flip arrow. I want to drop it a little bit, so I click that Z axis, and let's say we're going to drop it by 0.03 to give us plenty of room for facing, and we're going to hit OK. So as you can see, my part is now inside my stock, and my stock is oversized, which is not a big deal because we can now adjust that stock based on parameters. So let's go up to the top. We're going to say modify parameters. And again, if you guys don't remember this, we set up our own parameters to control this. So my stock height does not need to be 2 inches. Let's go ahead and look at what 1 inch does. 1 inch is pretty good. However, I'm not really clearing my vise jaws. So maybe we go to a 1.625 parallel to get us up a little bit higher. That's looking much better. Now, based on a few of the other directions, I apologize, looking across that x-axis, 7 inches might be a little overkill. So let's go ahead and take that down to like 4 inches. And as you can see, my part is now fully contained within my stock, and my stock is set as needed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and jump back over to the manufacturer workspace. Now, in the manufacturer workspace, again, I am getting warnings because things have changed, and that's more than okay. We're going to go ahead and hit Control-G. And just like that, we're now fixed our Z-axis probing. We have now fixed our XY probing. And lastly, our facing cycle is now came in, and it is facing off our part based on our model height inside of our stock automatically. So this is a great way to improve your guys' performance when it comes to machining your parts. Also, don't forget, I did make another video like this based on a 5-axis, so feel free to check that out as well. Hey everyone, thanks for watching my parameter controlled vise video. Don't forget, I made another video, the same kind of concept around using a 5-axis kind of vise set up inside of Fusion 360 with Machine Sim. But before we go, I do have to ask, please give me a like, follow, and subscribe if you guys like this content. And by all means, give us comments down below if there's any content that you wish we would make. We are releasing videos every day. So to get those updates, again, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And as always, have a great rest of your day.